In a quiet village in Ghana, far from the noise of the cities, lived a woman named Mama Abina. Her small house stood at the edge of the village, built of red clay and roofed with palm leaves. Every morning, when the sun rose and the birds began to sing, she would wake up slowly, feeling her way along the walls. She could not see the light that filled her home, but she could feel its warmth on her skin. She had been blind for many years, ever since a sickness had taken away her sight. But even though she could no longer see, she still saw with her heart. Mama Abina had 2 children, a son named Kojo and a daughter named Efua. They were the light of her life, her reason to keep going even in the hardest times. When they were little, she used to sing to them every night, her voice soft and full of love. She told them stories about the stars she could no longer see, stories her own mother had told her long ago. The children loved her then. They would sit close to her, holding her hands, feeling safe in her warmth. But as the years passed, things began to change. Kojo grew tall and strong. Efua became a young woman, beautiful and full of dreams. They went to school and began to see more of the world. When they came home, they looked at their small house and their blind mother with different eyes. They saw what others saw, not a loving mother but a woman who could not see, who moved slowly, who needed help. Shame began to grow in their hearts, though Mama Abina never gave them a reason to feel that way. Sometimes, when the other children in the village teased them, calling them the blind woman's children, Kojo would get angry. He would shout at them or walk away quickly, pretending not to care. But inside the words hurt. Efua too began to hide her pain. When her friends came to visit, she would tell her mother to stay inside. "Mama," she would whisper, "please don't come out now. My friends are here." Mama Abina would nod quietly. She never wanted her children to be ashamed. So she stayed inside, sitting quietly on her mat, listening to their laughter outside. At night, when the village became silent and the moon rose above the trees, Mama Abina would sit alone. She would touch the walls of her house, remembering how her husband had built it before he passed away. She would think about her children, how their voices had changed, how their laughter had become distant. Still she prayed for them every night. She would whisper their names softly, Kojo, Efua, and ask God to bless them, to protect them, and to help them see what she could no longer see. Her blindness had made life harder, but she never gave up. Every morning she cooked food for her children even though she could not see the fire. She used her hands to feel the pots, the bowls, the grains of rice. Her movements were slow but sure. When Kojo and Efua came home, their meals were ready. She waited for them to eat first before she touched her own food. It was her way of showing love even when they did not notice. But Kojo had started to lose patience. He wanted to move to the city to work and earn money. He thought life in the village was too small, too poor. Sometimes he looked at his mother and felt anger that he could not explain. If only she could see, he thought. If only she was not like this, maybe life would be easier. He did not realize how much those thoughts hurt him inside, how they built a wall between him and the woman who had given him everything. Efua too began to change. She dreamed of becoming a seamstress in the town. When she went to the market, she would watch other girls her age laughing and dressing in fine clothes. She wished she could be like them. She began to hide her mother's blindness from people, pretending that Mama Abina was just old and weak. But whenever someone asked about her mother, she would look away, ashamed to speak. Mama Abina could not see the way they looked at her, but she could feel it. A mother always knows. She could feel the coldness in their voices, the distance in their steps. But she said nothing. Instead, she smiled when they came home and asked if they had eaten. When they were tired, she told them to rest. She never let her pain show. Her love was patient, and her heart remained gentle even as her children drifted away from her. One evening it rained heavily. Thunder rolled through the sky and lightning flashed. The roof of the house began to leak. Kojo and Efua sat quietly, watching the water drip through the ceiling. Mama Abina got up, feeling her way toward the corner where the rain came in. She placed an old bowl under the leak, using her hands to find the right spot. "Sit down, Mama," Kojo said impatiently. "You can't even see what you're doing." She smiled softly. "I may not see, my son, but I can hear the rain. I know where it falls." There was silence after that. Efua turned her face away, not wanting to see her mother stumble as she worked. Deep down she felt something, guilt, sadness, love, but she pushed it aside. It was easier to pretend she did not care. After the rain, the air smelled fresh and the frogs began to sing outside. Mama Abina sat by the door listening to the sound. She loved the rain, the wind, and the laughter of the village children. Though she could not see their faces, she felt their joy in the air. She touched the wet earth beside her and smiled. Even when you cannot see beauty, she whispered to herself, you can still feel it. Inside, Kojo watched her. For a brief moment, he saw the softness in her face, the quiet strength she carried. But pride stopped him from speaking. He turned away and went to bed. That night, when everyone was asleep, Mama Abina sat awake. She thought of her children, their growing distance, their quietness, the pain she could feel but not name. She wished she could hold them like before when they were small and laughed at her stories. She remembered Kojo's little hands holding her fingers and Efua's giggles when she sang lullabies. Those memories were her light in the darkness. She reached for her old basket and took out a piece of cloth. Slowly she began to sew. Her fingers moved carefully, feeling the thread. She wanted to make something for her children, something small to remind them of her love. She did not need her eyes for that. Her heart guided her hands. The rooster crowed early the next morning. Mama Abina finished her work and smiled. She folded the small cloth and placed it beside their sleeping mats. For my children, she whispered, so they will know their mother still loves them. When Kojo and Efua woke up, they saw the little handmade cloths, one for each of them. They looked at them quietly but said nothing. They did not know that their mother had stayed awake all night just to make them. Mama Abina smiled as she heard them moving around. She stood up, feeling her way to the kitchen. My children, she said cheerfully, today I will make your favorite porridge. Efua sighed softly. Mama, you don't have to. We'll eat at the market. It's no trouble, my dear, Mama Abina replied gently. A mother's heart is full only when her children eat. Her voice was warm and her smile brightened the room, though she could not see it. But Kojo and Efua did not look back at her as they left the house. The sound of their footsteps faded down the road, leaving her standing alone by the doorway. She lifted her face toward the sunlight, feeling the warmth on her skin, and whispered softly, May the world be kind to my children. The morning sun rose slowly over the small village, painting the sky in shades of gold. The air was warm and the smell of roasted maize drifted from nearby homes. It was an ordinary day, but for Mama Abina, something felt different in her heart. She could sense it, the way mothers always do when change is coming. Kojo had gone to town early that day. He often went to help a trader carry goods, earning a few coins to buy food for the house. But when he came home that afternoon, his voice was loud and full of excitement. Mama, he called as he entered the small clay house. Mama, you won't believe it. A trader from Accra offered me work in the city. Mama Abina, who was sitting by the fire stirring a pot of porridge, froze for a moment. The spoon stopped moving. She smiled faintly, trying to hide the worry that suddenly filled her chest. In the city? She asked quietly, turning her head toward the sound of his voice. Yes, Mama, Kojo said eagerly. He said I can earn real money there. Not just small coins like here. I can even send some back to you. Efua, who was washing clothes outside, dropped the cloth she was holding and ran inside. The city? She said, her eyes shining. Oh, Kojo, can I come with you? I'm tired of this place. I want a better life too. Mama Abina's hands trembled slightly. She reached out, searching for the wall to steady herself. Her heart began to beat faster. My children, she said softly, the city is not always what it seems. People there forget who they are. They forget their families. Stay close to me. We can still live well here. Kojo frowned. He loved his mother, but her blindness made him feel small, helpless, and trapped. Mama, he said, trying to sound patient, you don't understand. You can't even see how hard it is here. Every day I work for little and still it's never enough. The city is full of chances. I can't waste my life in this village. Efua nodded quickly. Mama, you always say God will provide, but we also need to work for our future. I want to learn to sew. I can't do that here. The words stung like thorns. Mama Abina's heart felt heavy, but she did not want to stand in their way. She turned her face toward the sound of their voices, her blind eyes glistening. If that is what you both want, she said softly, then go. But remember, the city can change hearts. Do not let it take yours. Kojo sighed. Mama, it's just work. We'll come back when we've made something of ourselves. But deep inside, he knew that once they left, returning might not be easy. The dream of the city was too bright, too tempting. That night, Mama Abina could not sleep. She lay on her mat, listening to the wind outside and the rustle of the trees. Her mind was full of memories, Kojo's laughter when he was little, Efua's small hands holding hers as they walked to the market, their voices calling her Mama, with love. She turned her face toward the roof and whispered a prayer. O Lord, guide my children. They are all I have. Keep them safe wherever they go. The next few days passed quickly. Kojo packed his few clothes in an old bag. Efua folded her dresses neatly and tied them in a bundle. The house felt quieter than usual, as if it already knew they were leaving. Mama Abina tried to hide her sadness. She cooked their favorite food, groundnut soup with rice balls, and served it with a smile. As they ate, she listened to their voices, so full of hope and excitement. Kojo talked about tall buildings, busy roads, and new opportunities. Efua spoke about sewing machines, shops, and new dresses. They sounded like people dreaming of another world. After the meal, Mama Abina sat quietly near the fire. "My children," she said softly, "before you go, take these." She reached beside her and brought out 2 small pieces of cloth, the ones she had sewn in the night, stitched carefully with love. "Keep them close, so that no matter where you go, you will remember home." Kojo took the cloth, his face calm, though his heart felt a strange heaviness. Efua smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mama," she said, tucking hers into her bag. On the morning they were to leave, the sky was clear. The road that led out of the village stretched long and dusty. Mama Abina woke early. She dressed slowly, feeling her way around the room, her fingers brushing the rough clay walls. She could hear the sound of her children's footsteps as they prepared to go. Kojo lifted his bag and stood by the doorway. Efua tied her scarf and looked around the small house, the wall she had grown up in, the mat her mother sat on, the fire that had cooked all their meals. For a moment, her eyes softened. But when she saw her mother groping for her walking stick, the old feeling of shame crept back. She quickly looked away. Mama Abina reached the doorway and stopped. She could feel the morning sun on her face. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. "Yes, Mama," Kojo said. "We should go before the sun gets hot." She stepped closer to them and reached for their hands. Her touch was gentle but firm, as though she never wanted to let go. "My children," she whispered, "the world is wide and it can be kind or cruel. Whatever happens, do not forget who you are. Do not forget where you come from. And do not forget your mother." Kojo swallowed hard. Efua looked at the ground. Neither could find words to answer. Then Mama Abina raised her face toward the road. "May God guide you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "May He lead your steps where my eyes cannot follow." Tears rolled down her cheeks, though her blind eyes could not see them. Kojo shifted uncomfortably. "We'll send word when we arrive," he said quickly. He did not want to cry. Efua nodded, whispering a quiet, "Goodbye, Mama." And then they turned and began to walk. Mama Abina stood there, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading into the distance. The wind blew gently, lifting the edge of her wrapper. She raised her face toward the sound of the road, even though her eyes saw nothing. "Go well, my children," she murmured. "Go well." When their voices disappeared completely, silence filled the air. The only sound was the chirping of birds and the rustle of dry leaves. Mama Abina slowly turned and walked back into the house. Every step felt heavier than the last. Inside, she touched the mat where they had slept, the bowls they had eaten from, the walls that had echoed with their laughter. Now everything felt empty. She sat down quietly and folded her hands. Days turned into weeks. The house was quiet except for the sound of the wind and her own prayers. She waited for news from her children, listening for footsteps on the road, hoping for a letter, a voice, a sign. None came. But still she waited. Every night before she slept, she whispered their names, Kojo, Efua, asking God to keep them safe. Sometimes she smiled, remembering their faces as children, how Kojo used to bring her flowers, how Efua would braid her hair and laugh. Those memories were all she had left now. Though the world had gone dark for her eyes, she still carried light inside her, the light of a mother's love, unbroken, unshaken, and endless. When Kojo and Efua arrived in the city, they were amazed. The streets were wide and full of noise. Cars honked. People shouted. Vendors called out, selling bread, fruits, and roasted corn. Everywhere they looked, there was movement and life. The city seemed like a dream come true. Kojo walked through the busy streets with his small bag slung over his shoulder. The trader who had promised him work met him near the market. "Ah, my boy, you are here," the man said, smiling. "Come tomorrow morning and I will show you what to do." Kojo nodded, feeling proud. Efua, standing beside him, looked around. "The city is beautiful," she whispered. "So big, so full of light." She thought about the quiet village they had left behind, and for a moment she felt free. The first few days went well. Kojo worked hard, helping the trader carry heavy sacks of rice and beans. Efua stayed in a small room they rented from an old woman, helping her with chores in exchange for food. They thought everything would only get better. But soon things began to change. One morning when Kojo arrived at the market, the trader frowned. "Business is bad," he said. "I cannot keep you anymore. Go find work somewhere else." Kojo stood there, confused. "But sir, I came all the way from the village," he said quietly. The trader only shook his head and walked away. That evening, Kojo returned home with tired feet and an empty stomach. Efua was sitting on the floor, staring at a small pot of cold water. "I couldn't find anything to eat," she said softly. "The woman I help has gone to visit her sister. There is no food left." They sat in silence, listening to the noise of the city outside. Children were laughing somewhere far away. Music played from a nearby shop. But in their small room, it was quiet and dark. Kojo leaned back against the wall. "Maybe things will get better," he said, though he didn't believe his own words. Days turned into weeks. Kojo looked for work everywhere, at the market, by the bus station, at construction sites. But no one wanted to hire him. Efua tried to sew clothes for women in the neighborhood, but she didn't have a sewing machine, only a needle and thread. She earned a few coins, but it wasn't enough. Some nights they went to bed hungry. The city that once looked bright now felt cold and unforgiving. Sometimes Efua would lie awake thinking of her mother. She could almost smell the smoke from the fire at home, hear her mother's gentle voice calling her name. "Efua, the food is ready," she would say in her memory. Tears filled her eyes as she turned away from Kojo so he wouldn't see. Kojo, too, thought of their mother often. He remembered how she used to wait for them with a smile, even when she was tired. He remembered her hands, rough from work, but always gentle when they touched his face. He had been angry at her for being blind, but now he wished he could see her again, even just once. One night it rained heavily. The roof of their small room leaked. Water dripped onto the floor as thunder rolled through the sky. Efua hugged her knees and began to cry softly. "Kojo," she whispered, "what if Mama is sitting in the rain right now? What if she has no one to help her?" Kojo said nothing. He could feel his throat tighten. The image of his mother sitting alone in the dark came to his mind. He remembered the day they left, how she had held their hands and prayed for them. He remembered her blind eyes, filled with tears he had ignored. The next morning they woke up cold and hungry. Kojo tried again to find work. He carried bricks at a construction site for 2 days before the foreman refused to pay him. Efua helped in a small food stall, washing dishes until her fingers hurt. She earned only enough for a piece of bread, which she shared with Kojo. "Do you ever think about home?" she asked him one night. He nodded slowly. "Every day," he said. "But we cannot go back now. Mama will think we failed." Efua's eyes filled with tears. "Maybe we did fail," she said. "Not at life, but at love." Months passed. The city kept moving, fast and loud, not caring who was lost in it. Kojo and Efua grew thinner. Their faces lost their bright look. Hope became something far away. Then one afternoon something unexpected happened. Kojo was sitting by the roadside, tired and dusty, when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. "Kojo! Kojo!" He looked up. It was Kwaku, a man from their village, carrying a large bag of yams. "Ah, my boy," Kwaku said, smiling as he came closer. "It is really you. Your mother has been asking about you." Kojo stood up quickly. "You saw my mother?" "Yes," Kwaku said. "But she is not well. She fell sick some weeks ago. The neighbors help her, but she is weak. She still asks about you and Efua every day. She says, 'Tell my children that I pray for them every night.'" Efua, who had just returned from washing dishes, stopped when she heard the words. Her face went pale. "What did you say?" she asked softly. Kwaku looked at her with pity. "Your mother is ill. She said she misses you both." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Efua's eyes filled with tears, and before she could stop herself, she began to cry. "Mama," she whispered. "Oh, Mama." Kojo sat down slowly, his hands trembling. His heart felt heavy, full of guilt and pain. "She still asks about us?" he said in a shaky voice. Kwaku nodded. "Yes." Even when she could barely speak, she said, "Tell my children I forgive them." Kojo covered his face with his hands. He felt something deep inside him break, a wall he had built long ago. "We left her," he whispered. "We left her alone." Efua knelt beside him, tears running down her cheeks. "We thought we were blind because of her," she said softly, "but it was us, Kojo. We were the blind ones." Kwaku sighed. "It is not too late. Go home. She needs you." For the rest of that night they could not sleep. The city noises faded into the distance as their minds filled with memories of home, their mother's laughter, her songs, her prayers. They remembered how she had shared her last meal with them, even when she was sick, and how she had blessed them when they left. Efua sat by the window looking at the dark sky. "What if we go home and she is gone?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kojo's eyes were wet but his voice was firm. "Then we will still go. We owe her that." When dawn came they packed their few things, the same small bags they had brought months ago. Kojo tied his mother's cloth around his neck, the one she had made for him. Efua did the same. As they stepped onto the road that led out of the city, the world seemed quieter. The dreams that once brought them here now felt small. The only thing that mattered was home, and the mother they had left behind. The road back to the village was long and dusty. Kojo and Efua walked quickly, their hearts heavy with fear and guilt. The same path that had once led them toward their dreams now felt endless. The sun burned above their heads and their clothes clung to their skin with sweat, but they did not stop. They wanted only one thing, to reach home before it was too late. Along the way the memories of their mother filled their minds. Kojo remembered how Mama Abina would wait at the doorway every evening, listening for their footsteps. He remembered her laughter, her voice calling, "My children, come and eat." Those sounds had once annoyed him, but now he wished more than anything to hear them again. Efua walked quietly beside him, tears drying on her cheeks. She thought about the last time she had seen their mother, standing at the road, her blind eyes filled with tears as she prayed for them. That image haunted her. She wanted to run but her legs were weak. By the time they reached the edge of the village, the sun was setting. The air smelled of cooking fires and red dust. Children were playing in the distance, their laughter echoing through the trees. Everything looked the same, yet it felt different, quieter, older, sadder. When they reached their home, Kojo stopped. The small clay house stood just as they had left it, but the walls looked cracked and the roof sagged in places. The doorway was open and smoke from a dying fire drifted into the air. Efua's chest tightened. "Kojo," she whispered, "I'm scared." He swallowed hard. "We have to go in." They stepped through the doorway slowly. The room was dim. The smell of herbs and old clay filled the air. And there, lying on her mat in the corner, was Mama Abina. Her body was thin, her hair streaked with gray. Her hands rested quietly on her chest. She looked weak but peaceful. When she heard the sound of footsteps, she turned her head slightly. Her voice came out soft but clear. "Kojo? Efua?" The sound of her voice broke something inside them. They ran to her side and knelt beside her mat. Kojo took her hand in his, feeling how light and cold it was. Efua covered her mouth as tears began to fall. "Mama," Kojo said, his voice trembling, "we are sorry. We should never have left you." Mama Abina smiled gently. Though her eyes could not see, her heart recognized the shape of their voices, the warmth of their presence. "My children," she whispered, "you have come back." Efua began to cry harder. "Mama, we were wrong. We thought the city would give us everything, but it only took everything away. We were blind, Mama. We did not see your love." Mama Abina reached out her shaking hands, touching their faces gently. Her fingers brushed against their tears. "Do not cry, my children," she said softly. "A mother's love never ends. Even when her eyes cannot see, her heart still watches." Kojo pressed her hand to his cheek, weeping. "We left you alone. You were sick and we were not here." Mama Abina smiled faintly. "You are here now. That is all that matters." The room was silent except for the sound of their sobs and the slow, steady rhythm of her breathing. The last light of the sun entered through the small window, casting a golden glow across the room. Dust floated gently in the air, dancing in the light. Efua looked around the small house. Everything was as their mother had kept it. The same clay pots, the same basket by the wall, the same mat she always sat on. Nothing had changed except them. They had changed. They had grown not in years but in understanding. "Mama," Efua whispered, "we brought nothing from the city. We have only ourselves." Mama Abina's hand found hers and squeezed it weakly. "You brought your hearts," she said. "That is more than enough." Kojo looked at his sister. "We will stay now, Mama," he said firmly. "We will not leave again." Mama Abina smiled. "I know," she said softly. "But I am tired, my children. I have waited for this day. My heart is full now that I have heard your voices again." Kojo shook his head quickly. "No, Mama. Please don't say that. You will get better. We will take care of you." But Mama Abina only smiled again, her face peaceful. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. "Life is like the sunset. It must rest so the dawn can rise again. What matters is the love we share, not how long it lasts." Efua laid her head gently on her mother's chest, listening to her weak heartbeat. "Mama," she whispered, "I love you." Mama Abina brushed her hair softly. "I love you too, my daughter." Then she turned to Kojo. "And you, my son, do not let pride blind you again. You are strong, but strength is nothing without kindness." Kojo's tears fell freely now. "I will never forget, Mama," he said. The air in the room grew still. The fire outside had burned out and the night began to fall. Crickets started to sing. Mama Abina's breathing slowed. She still held their hands tightly, her fingers wrapped around theirs like a final blessing. "My children," she whispered, her voice faint, "forgive yourselves. And forgive me if I ever made you feel less than loved. I will always be with you, even when you cannot see me." Kojo and Efua both leaned close, holding her hands, their faces wet with tears. The silence stretched. Then Mama Abina took a deep breath, one soft, slow breath, and exhaled gently. Her hand relaxed in theirs. A calm smile rested on her lips. "Mama?" Efua whispered, her voice shaking. Kojo pressed his fingers to her wrist, but there was no movement. The room felt suddenly quiet, too quiet. Efua began to sob. "No, Mama, please. Please wake up." She held her mother's shoulders, shaking her gently, but Mama Abina did not move. Kojo sat still, his eyes full of tears. "She's gone," he whispered. They stayed there for a long time, holding her hands, feeling the warmth fade slowly. The night wind entered through the doorway, carrying the smell of rain. Efua wiped her tears and looked at her mother's peaceful face. "She's smiling," she said softly. Kojo nodded. "She was happy we came back." Efua leaned her forehead against her mother's hand. "She waited for us," she whispered. "She waited until we returned." Kojo's voice was quiet but filled with awe. "She saw us again, not with her eyes but with her heart." They sat there until dawn, their hearts broken yet strangely full. The first rays of morning light touched the house, turning the walls golden once more. Birds began to sing outside. Efua looked at the light and whispered, "She is free now." Kojo nodded slowly. "And we can see now," he said. "Truly see." The little house, once filled with silence and regret, now felt warm again, not because Mama Abina was there, but because her love still lived within them. They finally understood what she had always tried to teach them, that blindness is not when the eyes cannot see, but when the heart forgets how to love. And though Mama Abina had closed her eyes forever, she had opened theirs. The morning after Mama Abina's burial, the village was silent. The air felt heavy, and even the birds seemed to sing softly, as if they knew a kind soul had left the world. Kojo and Efua stood beside their mother's grave, holding hands. The earth was still fresh and the scent of flowers filled the air. A small wooden cross stood at the head of the grave, with her name carefully carved by Kojo himself. For a long time they said nothing. The memories of their mother's gentle voice and soft laughter filled their hearts. Efua knelt and placed her palm on the soil, whispering a prayer. "Rest well, Mama," she said softly. "We will make you proud." Kojo nodded beside her. His face looked older now, not because of time, but because of the lessons he had learned through pain. "We hurt her," he said quietly. "But she forgave us even before we asked." Efua looked at him, her eyes red but calm. "That is what makes her different," she said. "Her love was never blind." After the funeral, they decided not to return to the city. The noise, the hunger, and the false promises of that place no longer called to them. The village was where their mother had lived, prayed, and waited for them. It was where her heart had always been. So they stayed. Their first task was to fix the small house she had loved so much. The roof leaked when it rained and the walls had cracks from years of weather. Kojo worked every day under the hot sun, mixing mud and clay to rebuild the walls. Efua fetched water from the stream and cleaned every corner of the house. They wanted it to shine again, not because she was there but because her spirit still lived within those walls. When the work was done, they planted flowers around the house. Efua chose bright red hibiscus and yellow marigolds, the kind their mother used to admire. Every morning, she watered them carefully, whispering, "These are for you, Mama." Inside the house, they placed Mama Abina's picture on a small wooden table. Beside it, they lit a clay lamp every morning and every evening. The soft light filled the room, casting a gentle glow on her smiling face. It became a ritual, a way of keeping her close. Villagers began to notice the change in Kojo and Efua. The two who once walked with pride and impatience now moved with humility and warmth. Old women smiled when they passed. Children ran to greet them. People spoke softly among themselves, saying, "Mama Abina's spirit still walks among us through her children." Kojo started helping the elderly men in the village. Every morning he visited old Papa Kwame, helping him cut firewood or fetch water. He no longer sought money or praise, he simply wanted to do good. When someone thanked him, he would smile and say, "It's what my mother would have done." Efua too found a purpose. She began visiting the widows, women who lived alone with no family. She cooked for them, cleaned their houses, and sat with them in the evenings listening to their stories. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine her mother sitting beside her, smiling. Though the guilt of their past never truly left them, they learned to turn it into love. It became the fire that pushed them to care for others. They understood now that love was not about words but about actions, about showing kindness even when no one was watching. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Kojo and Efua would sit outside by the fire. The sound of crickets filled the air, and the smell of burning wood mixed with the cool evening breeze. They often talked about their mother, sharing stories from their childhood. "Do you remember," Efua said one night, "how Mama used to hum while she cooked?" Kojo smiled softly. "Yes. Even after she went blind, she still hummed. She said it helped her see happiness in her heart." Efua nodded. "She was never really blind, was she?" Kojo shook his head. "No. She saw more than we ever did." The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Life became simple again, not easy but peaceful. They had little but they lacked nothing. Their mother's lessons had become their way of living. One morning as the sun rose over the hills, Kojo stood outside, watching the light spread across the village. He felt the warmth on his face and smiled. He realized that the light reminded him of his mother, gentle but strong, bright but calm. He turned to Efua who was lighting the lamp inside. "She gave us her light," he said quietly. Efua looked at the flame flickering near their mother's picture. "And we will keep it burning," she said. The people of the village often came to them for advice or help. Some said, "Kojo has his mother's kindness." Others said, "Efua has her mother's heart." The two never boasted. They only smiled and said, "We are only following her path." Years passed but they never forgot the lessons their mother taught them. Love, patience, and forgiveness. Whenever they felt tired or lost, they would return to her grave, sit beside it, and talk to her as if she were still listening. One evening, after a long day of work, Efua stood at the doorway watching the sunset. The sky glowed in shades of gold and red, the same colors of the flowers around their house. Kojo joined her, his hands still dusty from the field. "She's watching us," Efua said softly. Kojo nodded. "I can feel it," he replied. "Every time the wind passes, every time the lamp flickers, I feel her presence." Efua smiled faintly. "We were blind once," she said. "But now we see everything clearly." Kojo placed his arm around her shoulders. "Her blindness was never her weakness," he said. "It was her light. And now that light lives in us." They stood there for a while watching the sky fade into night. The stars began to appear one by one, like little lamps across the heavens. Efua whispered a final prayer under her breath, thanking God for the mother who had loved them beyond sight, beyond pain, beyond time. From that day on, Kojo and Efua lived not just for themselves but for others. Their small house became a place of comfort for anyone in need, the hungry, the lonely, the poor. People said that the light in that house never went out, no matter how dark the night was. And in many ways they were right. Because it wasn't just a lamp that burned inside, it was Mama Abina's love, shining forever through the hearts of her children. They had hated their blind mother once. But now they carried her vision, the kind that saw with the soul, not with the eyes. And though her voice was gone, her lessons still spoke every day, in every act of kindness, every tear wiped, and every prayer whispered in her name. Her blindness had never been her curse. It had always been her gift. And now it was theirs too.